bit about fish food, because the quality of fish food is where it all starts to have high water quality. So good nutrition and good water quality is the key to happy fish. So as far as water quality is concerned, high quality fish food equals less waste. So we want to try and keep the tank clean. So if we have food which is set at the absorption ratios of the fish, we can feed the fish less. They'll get more nutrients out of the fish, and therefore the tank will stay cleaner. So that all goes towards lowering our maintenance. Now, a really interesting fact that's been discovered relatively recently is that the ratio of nutrients required by one fish and another fish is pretty much exactly the same, regardless of whether they're a herbivore or a predator. So let's say a fish requires this much protein, this much amino acid, this much carbohydrates, this much vitamin A, this much vitamin C, whatever the ratio is that they require. It's actually exactly the same with a herbivore to a predator. But it's the way that the fish are able to process the food that allows them to eat what they eat in the wild. So fish evolved to be able to eat certain foods in times of scarcity. So you've got herbivores that can process large amounts of green stuffs which are hard to digest. So they've got very long digestive systems. Then you've got predators, and the predators have got big stomachs and short digestive systems, so they can process huge amounts of proteins, trying to get the vitamins out of it. But if you feed a food which is set at their absorption rate, then you can put less in and then less comes out, so the tank stays cleaner. Now this food here is called New Life Spectrum. It is by far the best food in the world. Now most foods, the aim to produce the food is to get a perceived value of quality, put the product on the shelf as cheap as possible to try and increase profits and return investment to shareholders. Now this food here is pretty much owned and run by one single guy who is an absolute world leader in regards to fish feed. And what he pretty much says is his job is pretty simple. He studies what he puts in the fish versus what comes out of the fish to try and maximize the quality of his food, to make his food as clean as possible and to give the fish exactly what they require. And if you haven't tried this food, I really recommend you try it, particularly with tanks that I'm involved in looking after, with dentists and doctors, and tanks where I'm not seeing the tank regularly. If the customer goes off this particular food and goes onto another food that I would consider to be a high quality food, over time I really will see the difference. I'll see elevated nitrate and phosphate levels, I'll see the tank not stay as clean. Often the fish are not as brightly coloured because this is an awesome colour enhancer, and just the general health of the fish are absolutely awesome. So quality of food is absolutely everything. And there's a big debate about variety versus quality. People will say, well, if you just try a whole range of foods, you're better off. Well, not necessarily, because once again, fish are after this various ratio of nutrients. And if you can provide exactly the ratio of nutrients within one food, then what's the difference between feeding this one day, another food another day, and another food another day, or you're getting those foods, putting them all in the blender and then feeding them as one particular one. So this food is actually better than feeding a variety of foods. Now, if your fish don't go straight onto this food, which is extremely rare, what you want to do is get your old food, mix it up with this one so it all smells the same, and put it in and get the fish onto it. I find almost all fish take to this stuff straight away. So it's one of the only foods I've ever seen that will actually heal head and lateral line erosion. It just is absolutely wonderful for the fish's health, vitality and colour. So it all starts with good quality food and not feeding too much. If you follow the instructions on most food, you tend to feed way too much. I only feed my fish about what they eat in 30 seconds. And so that means there's not one speck of food after 30 seconds. If you read some foods, they say like feed them twice a day what they eat in 5 minutes and stuff, which is absolutely ridiculous. But you also want to look at the fish. So if you notice over time they're getting a bit of a belly, then you want to just bank it off a little bit. And then if you notice that they're getting a bit thin, you need to increase it. But in general, what they eat in 30 seconds, say in the morning, 5 times a week is pretty much perfect. There is, of course, some exceptions with slow feeding fish like discus. You might want to feed them a little bit more regularly, but pick a routine then watch the fish's belly, and that'll pretty much tell you everything you need to know. But once again, there is no substitute for quality, and I've never found a better food than this.